All right, welcome everybody. Thanks for being here. We know you got all kinds of stuff to do. Just being a parent means you have lots to do. Rachel often reminds me how she has 27 jobs, at least.
Full-time jobs.
Full-time jobs. And
at least 27.
I think she's handling them all masterfully with only the measly 24 hours she has. But it's real. The load is real. And I know you feel that and you know that. And so really want to talk today. And I hope we'll all kind of chime in and you jump in the chat box or on the microphone. Let's have just a really heartfelt, beyond surface level discussion about the realities of parenting, which Rachel sent me a text today about. The reality is like mind, body, and spirit. It's the whole thing. And you feel the whole thing in parenting, right? All of it, mind, body, and spirit. It's the whole deal, and the finances. It's all of it. It's everything, right? But let's figure out how we can do this to the best of our ability. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that raising another human being is one of the most difficult and challenging things in the world. It's just tough. And
it's tough by itself. And then you have to add everything else on it, like you were talking about. You've got to add taking care of yourself, because that can't be neglected, and building a business or managing the house or fill in the 27 other jobs. Like, that's why it's so challenging, because it's not just the raising the human being. Then you add more human beings to the mix too, and you've got multiple human beings.
And then every once in a while,
and they're all different.
You get offered a human being who has some unique and special challenges, and you're like, "Hello, raising this one was hard enough. Really? Did we need that?" Yeah. Right? And you get learning disabilities or physical disabilities or really strong personalities. Who has a strong personality child that you're like, are you kidding me? Where did that come from? I could have done without that. But it's actually, I mean, it's good. It's all good. But you add the whole thing in the mix.
Well, and then like Amy says, I was a washing machine repair person today.
Yes. And thank you for YouTube.
So exactly.
You guys have heard me say that. There isn't anything that YouTube and I can't do together. Gotta love that thing.
YouTube has taught our kids how to play the guitar and the piano. YouTube's great.
But it's not a very good parent substitute. So we're not suggesting that. Okay, but let's dive in and figure out how to do this really well. Because if we aren't really strategic and deliberate about parenting, well, you tell me, what happens if we don't figure this out? What are the realities? What's going on if we're not dialed in our parenting?
Besides being miserable.
Okay. Number one, misery. Number two, feeling guilty for the misery.
Exactly.
Number three, being miserable about the misery.
I think for me, it's all the fears of, if I don't do this right, they end up, in jail and on the wrong side of the law, etc. And, so it really makes me feel like I need to make sure I'm teaching them the things that we need. And at one point you think, yeah, you teach them right and wrong, but I feel like this generation needs more than that. And there's just so many nuances in what worked for my parents ain't working for my kids. And, my mom says that all the time. I just don't remember you guys ever being hard. And I'm sure we were, but, we've just taken it up about 10 levels of hard, and it's totally different.
Yeah, you're spot on. The stakes are high. You're right, Miriam. The stakes are high. This isn't a battle without casualties.
Parenting.
Yeah, this isn't your mom's parenting around here, right? This is real. There's and every generation has that, right? I'm sure, your grandma was like, "Whoa, man, It was crazy for that generation. It just keeps getting more complicated. And right now it's getting legit crazy. There's stuff going on, especially with technology and screens, and now the metaverse, these virtual realities coming, like it's throwing a whole new mix. So,
and the effects it has on mental health.
yes,
And
and
that whole package,
the whole spectrum. But you're right. So the stakes are high, because your kid could end up on the wrong side of the law, or the wrong side of happiness, for that matter, or the wrong side of health and good relationships. Other great comments here. What happens is emotional disconnection from the kids.
no future relationship.
No future relationship. That one has always been deeply concerning to me, because as a teen, I ended up leaving home at 16. I'm like, I'm out, man. And then as a really lonely teenager trying to figure out life, I remember vividly thinking many times, I'm going to be an awesome dad and I'm going to have a great relationship with my kids. One, because I don't want them to go through what I'm going through. But two, I want to have a relationship for my whole life with my kids. I want to have a great relationship. So then you're balancing like, well, am I going to be their friend, or am I going to be their parent and their friend and their mentor? Like, how do we figure this all out? What else? What else is on the other side of not taking this seriously and not doing it well? What do you feel and experience when you mess up? What is at stake here? Yes. Thank you. Not enjoying the process of raising kids. Man, that one hits. Because Rachel and I love to talk about this. When you're dating and courting and engaged and the newlyweds, like, you dream about the time you'll have a house full of kids. And now most of us are in the dream. We're living the dream, right? But it doesn't feel so dreamy as it did before we had kids. That was a lot more dreamy back then. Now the reality is that it's just tough. It's tough from day one. It's tough from pregnancy. And then I remember going through this, and I'm like, it'll get so much easier when the kids are older. It just gets different, right?
It just gets different. I like that.
Like, there's still plenty of challenges with teenagers, and then now young adults.
Well, more complex challenges, because I always think of it this way: when they're small, it's the basics. Like, yes, they need emotional security, but you've got to feed them and clothe them and, make through the day. It's kind of basic. But as they get older, now they're feeling loneliness, or they're feeling uncertainty, or they're feeling fear, or like it's more complex because they're developing into a human being that has as many emotions as I have, and you're trying to help them navigate those. That's a whole nother level of complexity,
which demands that you up your skill set.
Yeah.
It's easy to fix a spilled milk a little toddler cries about, but like, you clean up
It's tough when it's a broken heart.
Exactly. Now you got some work to do, and it demands that our skill levels go up. Here's some other great comments. One thing that can go wrong is not giving the kids the home that they deserve. Excellent insight. And
that was something that I think sparked this topic for me, is because if you read the email, which you probably did, we went to church on Sunday, and as soon as we pulled up, I saw a dad yanking his kid out of the car. And it just kind of broke my heart a little bit, because kids don't deserve to grow up in that kind of environment. But on the other side of it, I've also been there, and I know how hard it is and how frustrating it can be when you feel like you're at your wit's end and you just don't know what to do. And that's so challenging. And so it is very difficult to say, how do we provide this home that our kids deserve to grow up in? How do we be the parents that they deserve to have? when sometimes we feel like we just don't have what it takes. We just feel so victimized ourselves, right? Like, I am a victim to your chaos. I don't know what to do with it. I don't know how to handle this. Another thing I remember, when I was a young mother, I was either pregnant with our third, or I'd recently had our third. And we had some neighbors that had a backyard that connected to ours, and we were friends with them. We'd go to dinner with them. And I could hear her this one day. I had the windows open in my bedroom, and I could hear her yelling at the top of her lungs at her 7-year-old daughter, saying, "Why are you doing this to me?" And she was like in tears, yelling at her daughter, just in frustration at not knowing what to do and not knowing how to handle this child. Because you want to help them, you want to be there for them, but sometimes you just don't know how. And it's so heartbreaking for you to not know what to do. So my mom, she always says, this is where I got the topic from, because when when I've called my mom before about like, what do I do about this, or what do I do about this, she loves to say, parenting's not for wimps, And I just love that, because it's true. Parenting is not for wimps. It's a tough job. So,
Yes. Yes.
yes.
And what I want to do
And-
today,
Not but
and building something isn't for wimps. But man, if you know what you're building, you have some good plans and the right tools, it's a whole lot easier.
yes.
Cooking,
Exactly.
cooking a beautiful meal, not for wimps. But if you have a recipe and the right ingredients and the
Mhm.
right kitchen setup and tools in the kitchen, it's a whole lot easier.
There are strategies, there are tools that can make the job easier. Because often when we're at that point of feeling like I have no idea what to do, like that friend of mine.
And you feel
It's
like your
'cause-
only option is beating your kids. The only thing I have left is abuse. Like, don't make me go there. Right?
It's because we don't have the strategies.
Right.
I mean, really, that's what it comes down to. And it's hard to see that in the moment. With hindsight, you can, but it's because we don't have the strategies that we feel that sense of hopelessness.
So in a very real way, if you're taking notes, or I just want you to chew on this, in a very real way, when you bump up against a real parenting problem, the reality is most of the time it's because you have reached the limit of your current skill set.
Mhm.
It doesn't make you a bad person, doesn't make you wrong, right? We're constantly stretching and growing. I think all of us, this is our first go around to having kids, right? I don't remember doing this in another lifetime, so it feels like a clean slate. Like my first go around, especially for the oldest child, like, hey, really sorry, we're trying everything out on you.
We're sorry, you're the
Not
guinea
my
pig.
fault, you're the guinea pig. You just came first. Like, we're really gonna try to do better. Sorry, you had to be the experiment. But when you reach that limit of those skill sets, and I guess this is the framework I want you to kind of operate in. Whenever you're bumping up against a real problem or frustration, especially if it becomes chronic and it's happening repeatedly, stop and ask yourself, what skill am I missing? What skill, if I were 5 or 10 times better at that skill, would make this situation so much easier? That's a really powerful question, at least for me. I love asking myself that. Like, in this situation, it's really frustrating. I'm unsure what to do. If I were 5 times better at a certain skill, would that change the outcome of the situation? Absolutely. And then I'm like, okay, well, I know what to do. I know what to work on to try to remedy that. A couple more comments I want to hit, and then we'll dive in. Miriam said guilt and shame,
Mhm.
right? Lots of guilt around making mistakes with our kids, yelling, spanking, punishing, not being there, being distracted, being distraught. I heard a parent say to me recently, this one broke my heart. She said, when my kids were just having meltdowns, really needed me, I was in the other room crying for my own needs. I was broken. I needed help. And I was in my room locked in the door crying for me and my hurt when they were hurting and needed me to be there for them. Whew. When
But
she told us that,
yeah,
oh,
she didn't have what she needed to be able to be there for her kids. And we call that having an empty well, because when your own well is empty, you have nothing to give. And so that's part of what we're going to talk about, you know, filling our well, of course. But it is heartbreaking, because when you literally cannot be there for your kids because you don't have what it takes, you don't have enough to give, that has a very detrimental effect on our parenting and the outcomes.
one last comment, then we'll dive in. Not giving them a solid foundation to rely on when they are on their own, right?
Yeah.
Building that out so that when they launch, right, when they hit young adulthood, like, okay, they're ready. They've got a foundation to stand on, instead of they jump into life going, I got nothing. My parents didn't give me anything. I'm experimenting now again, right? We want to give them a foundation to build on.
Well, and so key to this too is going back to the comments about the emotional connection or the relationship. If we have that emotional connection and that relationship with our kids, that's a critical part of this solid foundation, because they're not going to know everything when they move out. Our daughter's 19, she's moved out, but the good thing is we have a great relationship with her. So she's constantly calling saying, what do I do about this? What do I do about this? How do I fix the car? What do I do? You know, she's got this relationship with a guy, and she called the other day asking for advice on how to communicate better with him. If you've got that relationship there, that's a part of that solid foundation that's preparing them to be out on their own. So that's key.
And if I can give a little bit of background on that one, this is a success story to give you guys hope. So Kaya is our oldest. She was adopted. We got her when she was 5 days old. She's a little black girl, just absolutely beautiful and wonderful. So there was not only normal teenage stuff where you're going through the discovery phase, right? They're all trying to figure out who they are. So self-discovery is hard enough as it is. Hers started about 11. A lot of girls I notice starts 11, 12, 13. Boys sometimes are a little bit later. They go through this like, who am I? Like this identity discovery, right? And it's pretty, there's a lot of turmoil. But then you add on top of that, she had some pretty severe learning and cognitive function disabilities that she was born with because her mom was on alcohol and drugs. So you add to that, then you add race to that, then you add adoption to that, and this deep identity thing of like, I don't fit in here. Plus, why did my birth mom get rid of me? I must not be wanted or valuable. And then we live this crazy lifestyle. We were actually living in Morocco at the time when this crisis began.
Well, which was not
like
when she was
6 years.
11, but was we were living in Morocco when she was 14. So she's dealing
It
with
was
all
their
of that. And then we're living in Morocco where nobody speaks English. They're only Arabic and French speaking. And she's a very talkative person. She needs to talk to people.
And couldn't talk. So it all is right. It was a tumultuous relationship with her. It was tough for a few years. And we really had to lean into it. And there was a lot she was going through. So I know we both went through times of like,
what are we doing?
Is this going to work? Like this whole adoption idea was a really great idea when we got a baby, but is this actually going to work? So we've had our moments. We had those nights in tears and the anguish and the fear and the frustration, but we stuck through it with all those complications.
And increased our skill set.
Massively. We had no other choice. Well, I guess, no, we always have a choice. We could have just said, oh, this sucks. This is the way things are. That's terrible, and not do anything about it. But I'm telling you that story because it was tough. There was added elements there that made it way more difficult than with our other children. And yet, because of that relationship we built with her and the skill sets and the principles and the foundation and all that, she's rocking it and calling all the time and still connected and like doing really well. So there's hope. But let's dive in then. If you're a parent, whether it happened by accident or by choice, like there's no sending the kids back. and it's not for wimps. So we're here. So what are you going to do about it? Is ultimately the question. It's here. The kids are here. We love them, even though they're tough. Sometimes you want to strangle them. They're here. What do you want or need to do to get this dialed in? So actually, let's ask that, and you can throw in the chat or jump on mic. What if we could make a list together of like, okay, what are the most essential things? What do we have to be doing strategically and well to make this work? Because no, I don't think there's anyone here. Thank you for being here, by the way. Thank you for caring. I don't think there's anyone here who's like, I don't even care about being a good parent. As long as my kids survive, they get to 18 and don't die, all good. I don't think there's anyone here that's like that. You care. That's why you're here. So thank you for caring, because every once in a while I meet some parents when I'm out at the store. Like, okay. Right? So thank you for caring. But what do we need to do? What do you need to do? And this get specific here. What are the things that really need to be focused on?
The more specific, the better.
Yes, absolutely.
I think when it comes to improvement, the more specific you can get, the better.
Okay, good. Amy says, being there, truly being there and being available. Okay, now that's actually crazy deep.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot there.
There's so much there, because how many of you have been physically present, but mentally and emotionally gonzo?
Or like this.
Right? Okay, only 2 of us. Well, the rest of you are amazing. Thank you. No, I'm just kidding. I think we've all been there, right? Yeah, you're either on a device, you're distracted, you're buffering, you're avoiding.
Which legitimately is tough when you work. I work on my phone. Greg works on his phone. I'm posting on Instagram. I'm doing my work. So that can be tough because
I make money through my phone, and the kids are in the kitchen like eating insane amounts of food. You'd be shocked how much food our teenagers eat. It's ridiculous. I'm like, I gotta make some money. I gotta be on my phone here. Like, and they're like, get off your phone. I'm like, dude, I'm paying for dinner. Right? But you got to separate that out. And I know some of you, I know quite a few of you actually have businesses you're doing. It's not just parent. You got to figure out how to balance that as well. So being present requires that we have the bandwidth mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, financially, to be there, to not be constantly worried about this, or so exhausted you literally have to hold your eyelids open to listen to your kids, tell you about their day, and you're like, I'm fading, help. Right? Whether they're 5 or 15. So there's a lot to being present. And I hope you'll ask questions. We'd love to do some specific coaching if anyone would like that. Like, there's a lot behind being present that we can address of how to be whole and full and filled and regenerating physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, so you can be present. And then there's some strategies, techniques, like turn the devices off.
Well,
learn how to manage your thinking.
I wanted to add, with the idea of being there and being available, that also a part of being a good parent is sometimes not being available. And that means you need to set boundaries that work for you too. Like, as a mom, I need to have boundaries where I can say to my kids, I've been there for you. I did this with you. And now this is my time to work or read or study or whatever it is. Like, it's okay to have that boundary of like, this is my time now. I'm going to take it and let them understand that mommy's a person too. And she also has needs that I have to honor. So yes, we want to be available, but we also want to let our kids know that sometimes we're not available. We're not available 24/7 because we're also a person that has to take care of themselves.
So appropriate boundaries are so healthy for you and them. So first inventory question here. Do you have clear boundaries?
And then there is a question about boundaries.
You guys are bombing the chat here. This is
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
Let's keep going.
Well,
Well,
should I do the one
Yeah,
about
go for it.
boundaries then?
Go for it,
How
yeah.
do you be nice and firm about those boundaries if they don't want to listen? Now, of course, it depends on the age, but in an age appropriate manner, I usually just explain the idea of, hey, I devote my time in the morning to doing these things with you. We do breakfast, we do this, and then it's my work time or whatever it is for you. And I need to be able to focus on this work time. Now, are they going to get that the first time you tell them? No, you're going to have to tell them that probably every day, maybe for the rest of your life, but not the rest of your life. Every day for a long time, they're going to have to hear it repeatedly, and you have to repeatedly put those boundaries up and say, wait a second, no, remember, this is my work time now. What are you going to do while I'm doing my work time? And have some activities that you're okay with them doing. Maybe that's when they're on a device. Maybe that's when they're watching a movie. Maybe that's when they're playing with Play-Doh. Maybe that's whatever. You come up with something that works, that you're like, this is your time for that, and it's my time for work.
Or recovery, or time away, or like you've got to have time for
A
you.
bath.
Whatever your
Whatever.
thing is, right? Where this fails miserably, you guys, is where, and this breaks my heart because I see it often when working with parents. If you try to set up alone time or you time, but you're not being available in the other times for your kids, oh, they will resent that and they will fight that. Because if you're saying, look, I need some of my time, but you're not actually giving them time when they need it and want it, that won't work. It'll always backfire. And they'll just see you as just a super selfish, self-centered, missing it person. One of my clients has a teenage daughter who's going through some pretty tough stuff. And it was exploding regularly. And one night she's like, you don't even know me. You don't talk to me. You don't listen to me. You don't care. You don't get it. Right now, obviously not everything your kids say is accurate or true, but in an interesting way, whether it's true or not, if they believe it, it's their reality. So if you have a child who sincerely believes you don't really listen and get me, that's a big problem. And so I said to this couple, I'm like, okay, when things are coming up like that, major red flags, like you stop everything, you pull all stops, and you're like, hey, I'm going to invest big time in this kid. And they're like, well, what do I do? And I'm like, take her on a trip. You and her, gone. Let her pick. So they sat down. They're like, and it was like, it's not, I'm going to fix you. It's not, it's just like, hey, let's go on a trip. And she's like, where do you want to go? And they're like, well, let's get out of the cold. Let's go somewhere beautiful. And so they went and took a full week, just mom and daughter, full week, Southern California, and just connected and talked. Just them, right? That's just one example of how to like really get in and invest. They're like, okay, I'm here for you. So I'm taking my daughter to Costa Rica soon, right? We try to take all of our kids out on trips and adventures, and we do a date with them. So every week, Rachel and I go on a date with one kid, right? None of our kids are going to tell you like, oh, our parents they don't listen to me. They don't care. They don't spend time with us. They all get individual attention, specific, like we're with you attention from us regularly.
Which, yeah, I mean, I'm glad you brought that up, because that is key to being able to set those boundaries, because if they feel like they're going to get that time and that they're not going to be missing out on that, then they're willing to let you have your time too, because they are getting that attention from you.
Now, I make it a point every single day to hug every one of my kids, actually multiple times a day. I hug them all the time. Constantly, there's touch, right? Hand on shoulder, holding hands, hugging, cuddling with the little ones, right? Even my big kids, like the big boys, I got my arm around, I'm like, what's up, buddy? Like, just talk to me. Like every single day, multiple touch points, lots of affection. Like, hey, how's it going? What are you working on that? Hey, let's do this together. I'm constantly doing one thing or another with them. right? So they're going to feel I'm into them a lot. So when I say, hey man, I got to do my work, I got to do my studies, I got to do my prep time, no problem. They're like, yeah, sure. Because they know I'm going to give them time. So I lift weights with my older boys. We're doing we do cool projects like wood building projects, or right now we're doing like a motorcycle project. We obviously do trips together. I'm doing volleyball. I'm helping coach my daughter's volleyball team now. Man, when you got 7 kids, you end up doing a lot of stuff.
Well, wow, look at this. I didn't know Miriam has 6 teenagers.
Woo!
My goodness.
You win.
And Mary has 4
Wow.
teen boys.
Nice.
And they eat a ton. Yes.
Yes, they do. Yes, they do. Okay, let's keep going here. So back up to the list here. Build open communication. Man, that is massive tact and diplomacy for you to communicate, but also for you to get them to communicate. Some kids just don't want to talk. You got to be a master of opening the floodgates, man.
And that can be tough because often we're like, oh, I want my kids to talk to me. I want them to tell me things that are important and meaningful and deep, like talk to me about their deepest feelings, when the only way to really get to that is by letting them talk about the things they want to talk about, which might be things you don't care about. So that's where it can be challenging, is because you have to let them just do that. If they want to talk about their book or the movie they saw or their drama with friends, whatever it is, you have to listen so they feel like you listen. So when they're ready to talk about something deeper, they will talk to you.
Because they feel like you're a good listener and you actually care.
Yeah.
I've had a lot, I've been working with youth for like 25 years. I've had a lot of youth tell me, my parents don't care. They don't give a crap. They might go through the motions of listening, but they don't care. Kids can see right through that. So you got to care. Like really care. And then I got to throw this out. Luckily, we heard this really early on. Brian Tracy, we're listening to a thing by Brian Tracy. And he said, if your kids are afraid to tell you the truth, who has made them afraid? I was like, oh yeah. Right? If when your kids do tell you things, they get a reaction from you, whether it's a criticism or a correction or a reaction, if you're explosive or critical, they're going to stop sharing. So even with
put on your poker face,
even with the best of intentions, if they don't like your reactions and they're pretty regular, they just are going to close down. So by the time they're teens, they're like, I got nothing to say. Is this all hitting home here? Like this good stuff. It's not for everybody. It's just tips and tricks, things we've learned along the way. Keep going.
Laura says, we've started meeting with each of the kids on Sundays for a half hour to just talk through things, set goals, and make sure we're on the same page with each one of them.
Fantastic.
Yes, that's great.
Whenever you do those meetings, make them enjoyable. Little treats, music,
favorite snacks,
like make it really pleasant so they have great memories with that stuff.
Yeah, you want it to be something they actually look forward to and they're asking you to do. We do dates with our kids and we take them out to, now of course we didn't do this when we were broke, we couldn't take them out, but now we take them out to restaurants. But you could still have a little snack in your room or something, but they look forward to that. And so they're the ones reminding us like, hey, it's my week for the date, let's go out, we got to go out. So that's helpful because they're making sure it's happening because they want to do it. So if you make it very positive and fun and like this kind of party atmosphere, they like to party.
And they feel like they're getting tons of attention, not tons of interrogation.
Yeah.
Like the feeling there, right? There's a big difference. If they're like, oh, time for my weekly interrogation, oh, that's not going to go over well. But if they're like, dude, are you just going to be with mom and dad and they're not interested in anything else but me?
Yeah.
When's my next meeting? I mean, they love it. They love it. So there's a great strategy there with that one.
Good. Okay. Stephanie says, be present in each moment, constantly observe opportunities to connect, create opportunities to quiet the world and distractions. Yeah. there's a lot of distractions, that's for sure.
Just a quick question on that one, and just something to kind of think through. Are you regularly helping your children process what's going on in the world? Are you helping them walk through it, understand it? Because they're hearing stuff constantly from all over the place. Even the littles, actually, even your really little ones. There's a lot going on and they can perceive it. There's a lot of emotions, a lot of feelings, there's all kinds of stuff going on. They sense it. They may not be able to articulate it, but they sense it. I think one of our greatest opportunities and responsibilities as parents is to help our kids process all the stuff they're hearing and experiencing and seeing. And if we don't do that, we think sometimes, oh, they're good, they got it. When really they're bottling all this stuff up, and then one day it just explodes. You're like, where'd that come from? And they're just like, the world is falling apart and I don't know what to do about it. And you're like, oh man, I haven't been helping them process those things.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a really great comment, Stephanie. Create opportunities to quiet. And I think what you're saying is like maybe keep some space out, keep some boundaries there from that, but also when it's making those demands, help them process and work through it and quiet their insides.
Mm-hmm.
So great insights. Keep going.
I need to focus on their strengths more and not just worry about where they need to improve. Yes, exactly. I think that is so key because I know it's easy for us as parents to be noticing all the things they need to be doing better. Because you're like, oh, I can see where this is going. I need to correct that so it doesn't become a problem. But when we're in that mode nonstop, that becomes nonstop criticism to our kids. So we have to be more intentional about noticing their strengths and what they're doing well at. And not just noticing it, but actually saying something about it, because that's what really matters. They don't know unless we say something to them, unless we point it out. Hey, you did really great on that. Oh, I love how you're doing this. Way to go for sticking with that. Like notice and vocalize those things.
Who here are my really driven, ambitious people, parents here? Drivers, like your go-getters. So this particular one has always been challenging for me because I am so driven. Like I want to be better. I want to achieve. I want to grow. And I've found a healthy way to be harder on myself than I am on anybody else or anything else. Like I go after it. That naturally, I don't even have to say anything. That naturally just radiates to the people around me. And so I've always had to put in extra effort and try to make extra consciousness and awareness of that fact, because if not, it just makes your kids feel bad all the time. Because they're never good enough. And so I have to go out of my way to praise the good and be super tactful and listening, because I'm just a go-getter, like, oh, I'm ready to get better all the time. And you have to do that gently and with diplomacy with kiddos.
Emily says, you guys introduced me to pattern interruptions, which has been huge for our family. It's mostly come through travel or activities outside. Yes.
So good.
Pattern interruptions are awesome. And just to recap, if you don't know what that is, it's essentially you've got your normal daily routines, and a pattern interrupt is anything that just kind of throws you out of that and helps you think about something else or do something else or get a different perspective on life or what's going on. It can be a trip, it can be an activity, it can be lots of different things, but it's very helpful for changing your state, like the emotional state you're in, the mental state you're in, generating more energy. So they're super powerful.
On that note specifically, if any of you have a child you've kind of found yourself getting into a pattern with,
A rut.
a pattern, aka a rut, or maybe it's siblings constantly fighting, or the disconnect, or the drama triangle. Have you guys heard of the drama triangle? Oh, it's actually an amazing concept. So we build drama triangles in our families, and then we kind of slip into this role, and there's 3 roles, and it's always happening, and it becomes chronic. and it goes on for years or decades sometimes. It's just natural for humans to get in this drama triangle, and we do the same thing every time. Well,
Pushing each other
you should do this.
buttons
Well,
and-
you always do this. And well, you remember this, and and it just, there it is again and again and again. If you find yourself in any kind of pattern like that, any kind of drama triangle, any kind of rut, in any way in your family at all, use a pattern interrupt to break out of it, and use as many as you have to. If you're struggling with a child, you're struggling with your spouse, or your spouse with a child, or two children with each other. Like, come up with creative pattern interrupts to break those things so they don't just keep going endlessly. That's where a pattern interrupt really makes a big difference. Like, okay, whoa, we're starting over here. Like, we're not going to just keep doing that. It's not working.
So what's a pattern interrupt for either kids that are fighting or a kid who is, losing control temper wise? I have racked my brain for weeks. Like, what is a good pattern interrupt here? And I'm struggling with that.
Fantastic question. Thanks for asking. Let's ask the whole group. I have some ideas, but let's ask the whole group. Let's go with a kid who's just kind of losing control and really having a hard time kind of managing emotions. What's something we could do there? I'll throw out mine again, throw them in the chat or jump on mic.
Mary's asking, how old is the kid?
Oh, great question.
He's 11.
11's
That
tough.
was 11.
we have an 11-year-old right now, and easily frustrated, kind of cynical, which is interesting. I got a Voxer message yesterday from a coaching client who's like, what do I do with my kid? Everything's gloom and doom and terrible. He's not happy about anything. And I'm like, oh yeah, he's 11. Like, you come home, it's all sucky. And it wasn't. Like, they're having fun. Like, hey, how was your day? Sucked. You didn't like anything? Nope. It's all crap. And you're like, okay, you're still 11. And part of it's the age, right? And that's what I told her. Like, sometimes if you help them, they grow out of it. Some kids never grow out of it. So you got to help them grow out of it, right? But at that age, it's hard, and they'll get really angry and rah. And so what are some thoughts here? Let's get this in. Okay, what about a service opportunity? Excellent, right? Because that's a major pattern interrupt. Let's go help somebody else. And they'll probably go grudgingly, I don't want to do this. But then if they're present enough, they realize, wow, that was a reality shift.
Is it okay for me to share stuff?
Please.
I don't know if
Wait.
you're waiting, if you're waiting or what,
No,
but
go.
I'm going to share some ideas. I know for me, it's super helpful, one, to try to prevent things. And generally I can do that by having clear expectations with kind of boundaries. So at least with my 11-year-old, and I've seen this with many of them in my family, my other 11-year-olds, that they like to know what's going to happen, and then they like that to kind of happen. And they especially get upset when what they thought was going to happen doesn't happen. And now something else has happened. It's like, whoa, what's going on? It's like their world is unstable or something. And so if I can have these expectations of like, if you do these things, then this is what will happen, which is generally a positive reward for them. And I stick to that, generally the day goes well, that those things happen. But if that gets thrown off, then I have to like help them process what's happening. I know, and I'll often just talk through that. I know you were expecting this. I know that this is what you wanted. This is what's happened instead. I know that that's frustrating. Here's what we have to do about it now. Here are our options. You have to choose the best option, even if you don't like them that much. The other thing that really helps is, especially in a situation like that, is sometimes I just have to be firm and be like, you know what? This is what's going on. I know you're upset about it. I do this for you. I do this for you. And if you want those privileges, you're going to have to cooperate. Especially at that age, it just takes some firmness sometimes of like, this is what you're getting. You get these things. and I provide them for you. And if you still want those things, you have to cooperate in this way. So those are a couple of things that have worked for us.
And that age, they're really exploring boundaries.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
they're starting to explore identity. What's happening in their brain is they're entering a new level of consciousness.
Yeah.
And they're learning their thoughts all over the place, their emotions all over the place, right? And so you're helping them process, you're setting up firm boundaries. We took our 11-year-old, and I know this is crazy for some of you, but it's working like magic, on some big adventures. He actually went skydiving with us.
But the important thing with that was he chose to go skydiving because his older
siblings were leading the way, and bungee jumping and cliff jumping. And for him, those few moments of facing his fears to do something epic was transformational for him in a big, big way. So sometimes the pattern interrupt is going out. Yeah, confidence building, massive confidence boost. And so sometimes it seems unrelated. You're like, he's struggling with emotions. Okay, go do this. Go try some martial arts, some gymnastics, something cool, something exciting, something new, something different. Because what happens is it creates a click, so to speak, a reality shift, and can be very helpful.
Well, that's essentially what a pattern interrupt is. They're in their environment. They're having the thoughts and feelings that they're having. And if you take them out of that environment and put them somewhere else, it changes all of the biochemistry. It changes what's happening in the brain. It changes the chemicals they're having in a simple way. I mean, with the same 11-year-old last week, the family was going to a train museum and he didn't want to go. Well, sorry, you're going to go because I pulled the card out if I had to. Well, I provide this, I do this, you've got your device. You're not going to use it unless you come along. And I do it in a nice way. I'm not like angry and yelling. I'm just firmly saying, if you want to have these privileges, this is how you earn them today. You go to the train museum. And of course he had a great time. Not
manipulation, but helping understand perspective. Like, hey, there's a lot of good things going on in your life that you might be taking for granted.
Yeah.
It's a give and take relationship here. You're part of a team.
Exactly. It helps a lot to remind them of the things that they're getting from you, and that they owe you in a way to cooperate with you. That's what they're giving back, is cooperation and respect. So I hope that's helpful. Those are definitely some things that have helped. I was reading while talking.
This is really funny. Amy says, my husband says a water spray bottle. That's a pattern interrupt. It actually can be if it's fun. It's like, but it can go bad on you, but it is kind of funny.
My dad used to spray me with a spray bottle when I was a teenager and I would be sleeping. That's how he would wake me up. I hated it. Absolutely hated it.
Did not work for you.
Yeah.
I think some of the things we're talking about would also work for the kids who are fighting. In that case, the more, because fighting is a withdrawal from the emotional bank account, the more deposits that can be made into those emotional bank accounts, the better. I know what I would do, and again, this isn't feasible for everybody, but these are just things that work. I would take those two and I would go do something really special, really cool, really memorable, make it like awesome. So what they have that memory to build off. I know one example, like we took he's now 16 and she's now 15. I took both of them to Mongolia and we went deep into the steppe and riding Mongolian ponies into the middle of nowhere. They have this bond between them now that is so special.
Now I'm laughing because you're making it sound like you have to take your kids to Mongolia in order to, like save the relationship. And no, what I'm going to add now was, plus besides what we were saying before, it sounds like you always have to like leave the house in order to solve problems. And that's not true either. Sometimes a pattern interrupt might be something as simple as, hey, why don't you come and cuddle with me? Why don't we go read a book together? Sometimes they just need maybe your one-on-one attention.
Yep. Or what if you grab those two and you're like, yeah, done. You go make some popcorn. You get some drinks. We're going to go down and watch a movie, just the three of us. And you're like, I don't want to reward bad behavior. It's like, you're not rewarding bad behavior. You're trying to change the state. You're trying to fix things. You're trying to make more positives, right?
Yeah, for us, a pattern interrupt at home is a board game or a card
Perfect.
game. Exactly.
Thank you.
It's
Excellent
a
example.
way of simply taking whatever's happening, which is generally negativity, and switching it to something positive. And sometimes that is a game or a movie or a book, or you go for a walk. You're just looking for a positive way to change the state. And when we're talking about state, hopefully you're familiar with like the emotional mental state that you're in and that they are in, because that's what's causing the problem partly, is that they're in a negative state. And so if you can switch that to a positive state, then everything gets better because they feel better.
So you could go play games. You play pickleball, tennis, like skateboarding, rollerblading, biking, hiking, walking, like sledding, like whatever. Just like, hey, let's just switch. Let's just go. And occasionally you got to drop everything and just lean into that because it matters so much.
Yeah. Dropping
Yeah.
everything.
Do an art project. I love it.
Okay. Emily says, how would you handle temper tantrums for 2-year-olds?
Good.
That's a great question. And I would say that, well, this is my parenting philosophy in general, and that's that prevention is the best medicine. Nearly every parenting problem, and trust me, because I've tried this out, almost all parenting problems are preventable. If you start to notice what causes the certain problems, whether it's with the 11-year-old or the 2-year-old, and then you start taking action to prevent those things from happening, you can prevent tantrums. You can prevent meltdowns because you're seeing the warning signs beforehand and you're intervening then. You can see that it's coming and you do something about it back here, where a lot of parents like to wait until it's a full-blown explosion. You don't have to do that. You can notice, if you pay attention, you'll notice the signs and you'll say, oh, right there, I know where this is going. It's going to a tantrum. And so at that point, you intervene and do something. Maybe it's a cuddle, maybe it's a snack, maybe it's a nap. Maybe it's just a change of environment. But you notice the early, smaller warning signs and you do something about them then, instead of waiting until it turns into a tantrum. Because usually what a tantrum means, especially for a 2-year-old and sometimes for a teenager, means I'm either overly tired, overly hungry, I'm overly stimulated, I'm feeling some sort of emotion that I don't know how to articulate. And so my only response now, or it's all of them. The only response is meltdown. I've literally reached a point of meltdown because I can't handle everything that's going on in my world. We do tantrums too sometimes as adults. We reach this meltdown period because we haven't met those needs before they got too much. Does that make sense?
So can I chime in?
Yes.
Mhm.
So my son, who's 2, he is very strong-willed. He's like me. We're both pretty stubborn, and we both have tempers. So we kind of, butt heads a lot, like my father and I did, which is very challenging for me because I just want to explode. Like it's a pattern, my whole childhood. It's like my dad would yell at me when he'd get upset and then I'd yell back. And it was just this horrible cycle. And I'm trying to break out of it. And it's driving me a little crazy because my son will just have an outburst. Like you tell him not to do something and he'll just keep going at it. And you're like, please stop, please stop. And I do get to points where I yell because I don't even know what to do anymore because I can't restrain him. He'll just keep going. I don't even know what to do with him at that point. I don't know if that makes sense. Like I know it's going to come if I tell him to stop doing something, but I'm not sure where to redirect him because he's just like laser focused on doing that thing. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
Perfect example.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
Can I
go
jump
ahead.
in?
Yeah.
So if you see it coming, and thank you for explaining that. And thank you for explaining the generational pattern. That's the drama triangle, right? You're like, oh, I felt that. And now, similar things gonna happen. I don't want that pattern to happen. So when you start to see it coming, he's doing something and you're telling him not to do it. Like right there in that moment. And again, this is for all of us. What could you do to be way more proactive? Because at that point, it's starting to be reactive. So every one of us, let's just ask, like, okay, when I see it coming, what can I do to be more proactive? Because obviously telling him not to do something, it's not working, is it? Because he's like, forget you. And you're like, I told you don't do it. And he's like, I told you I'm going to do it. So
now it's a battle of the wills.
It doesn't work. It never turns out. Those never end well. So right there in that moment, that's where we as striving to be better parents, we have to like stop and say, well, okay, I'm not going to be reactive. I've got to be way more proactive. What can I do? Because what I'm doing is not working. What can I do differently to shift the whole thing?
Can I add a comment here?
Wait for it. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Part of my overall parenting approach is I try to say no as little as possible. And I know that might sound crazy, especially with a 2-year-old, but I always look for the ways to say yes. And sometimes that means saying yes to what I want them to do and distracting them from what I don't want them to do. So it takes creativity because you're like, oh, they're going to want that thing. Maybe dad runs over or you run over and hide it. And then you're like, hey, look at this. Let's play with this thing. So you never have to say no. If no's causing the problem, avoid saying no. Like just as much as you can. If you know they're going to resist the no, then just try not to say it at all. Come up with other ways to redirect to something else that you can say yes to. Even now, like I save my no's for when they really matter.
Which
I try to say yes as much as possible.
So rare. I would be bold enough here to say every one of us should adopt that as a philosophy. Say no as rarely as humanly possible while you're raising your kids.
Now, sometimes my yes comes with conditions. If my children say, I buy kombucha because I like kombucha and they all want to have one, they say, can I have a kombucha? And I say, yes, if you clean up the kitchen. Instead of saying, no, you can't have one, they're for me. I'm like, yeah, I'll give you a kombucha if you clean up the kitchen. Can I have a keto popsicle? We buy keto popsicle. Yes, as soon as you vacuum the floor. So I'm coming up with ways to say yes as much as possible. And then when I say no, they know I really mean it because I'm like, no, that thing, no. But when they're young, especially when they're learning about these boundaries, they're going to push the boundaries. That's part of their job. They want to push those boundaries. So when you say no, they want to push that. That's just the natural stage they're in.
Toddlers and teens.
Yeah.
Toddlers and teens, man. You say no, they're going to do it.
They're pushing it.
So it's just constant redirect. Just become, I love the phrase, obstinate creativity. Like you just become obstinate in your creativity of ways to redirect. So you start seeing, if he's doing something annoying, maybe he's teasing your baby or teasing you, or he's laying on the ground, kicking the door. Caw, 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 caw. If you kick that door one more time, right? That doesn't work.
So instead you go like this.
Look at this. Look at this.
Oh my gosh. What? No, we really do that at our house. If we have a little kid, we'll do whatever it takes to get their attention and then be like, oh my gosh, come look at this. It's amazing. It's a bug.
And they're like, where, what is it? And you're like, oh, wait, look, there is the door.
It's getting all excited.
We just use distraction, and it's actually really works really well. And it works for us as adults too. When you're like, you find yourself mentally going into the spiraling out of control, like, whoa, what am I doing here? Like, no, let's focus on this over here.
What you want to focus on instead. And that solves, the majority of the time, that solves this negative problem just by refocusing on what you actually want. Same idea with a pattern. It's essentially a pattern interrupt. Another way of having a pattern interrupt you're refocusing your attention on what you actually want, which is fun, good feelings, happiness. Yes. So you focus on that and it avoids the negative, if that makes sense. Okay,
All good. So
good.
is that helpful?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I think so. He still is challenging though, because he's crafty.
good. You
He
want that.
yeah, I do, but so he'll like to push the buttons when I'm sitting down to breastfeed my other son, and he's free to roam around. So he'll like
can I
open the
pause right
fridge,
there?
take things out, and
Mhm.
all
You know what
that
he's
sort
doing?
of stuff.
He's
Yeah.
he's trying to
Uh-huh.
get your attention.
Yeah.
He's craving for attention. He's like, oh man, mom's breastfeeding.
Well,
I want attention.
or
Oh.
just taking advantage and
Or like,
he's
yeah.
wanting to get a reaction because you've reacted.
Yeah.
And so he's like, oh, I know how this works. Mom sits down, she can't get to me, and she reacts when I do
Yeah.
this stuff. So
Yeah.
starting out, I would just not react. Maybe that's one thing, is just be like, oh,
You're like, you can't push my
you
buttons because I
pulled
don't
all the
have
food
buttons.
out of the fridge and made a mess. Okay. That is
So,
another tool I use. I honestly
yeah.
will not react to the behavior, because the more energy, focus, and attention you give a behavior, even if it's negative attention,
It's still
that
attention.
still reinforces it. So if there's something I
Right.
don't want my kids to do, I ignore it until later when I can do something about it. I will talk to them about it. But in the moment, especially if there's nothing I can do about it, like especially in the car, this is the time I think of. If my kids are fighting in the back seat of the car while we're driving, there's nothing I can do about it. So generally I just ignore it. So ignoring the behavior is one of the first steps to fixing it, because the more you react to it,
Right.
the more they're going to want to do it, because it's getting a response. And that's interesting and fascinating.
Yeah. So he does. So we live in a two-bedroom apartment on the second floor, and he knows how to get our attention by stomping on the ground as hard as he can and
That
screaming.
gets a reaction.
And it does get a reaction. And I don't know what to do because the people downstairs are there most of the time. So the part of me that wants to be conscientious and not bother people is like, oh my God, this is terrible. This is the worst thing possible. So I have to try to stop him from doing that. So I don't know what I should do in that situation, because if I lived in a house, I would just let him do it, be like, go ahead, whatever. But I feel like I can't in this situation because I have gotten complaints about that.
Yeah, and that makes sense. And you do want to do something about that. In that case,
I would file a complaint about the complainers.
Oh gosh, no, stop.
Like, these people are unhappy people.
No.
Just kidding. Just kidding.
You know, we all get that. We don't want people making lots of noise above us. In that case, I would, again, you're taking this behavior, and instead of getting upset about the negative behavior, I always like to use a smile when I'm getting after my kids. Oh, let's not do that. Let's tiptoe. Let's be very quiet. And you turn it into this game with a smile on your face, so they don't feel like they're in trouble, but suddenly now mom is playing this game. Oh, this is interesting. Okay, let's try this game.
And my approach would be different. I would grab them and be like, are you upset? You want to be mad? Let's beat your bed. Jump on your bed, pound your bed, hit the bed. And I'd take them and we'd wrestle on the bed and pound the mattress and jump and pound, just where it's quiet, right? And he can be a boy and be rough and smash. Well, you're pounding into a mattress instead of the floor, right? So again, we're just gamifying both things and redirecting.
Yeah, gamifying. I like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would probably work well for him.
Yeah.
Yeah, for a little boy, oh man, he just wants
Yeah.
to hit things. Maybe get him a stick or a little bat or something. Like, you're mad? Go pound your mattress. Like, little boys love that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I let him be, rough, but give him a way to do it.
Another way of phrasing this is they want to express that emotion. It's okay for them to do that, but not pounding on the floor. So tell them where and how they can express that emotion. Yeah.
Okay. That helps.
Okay,
Thank you.
so I have an 11-year-old who's doing the same thing, except he's just been doing it his whole life. And so, looking back, I paid way too much attention to the negative behavior, but now it's hammers in walls and breaking windows. And, if I ignore the behavior, more things get broken. And if I try to stop him, so that's one of the things where I was like, where's a pattern interrupt here that I could help? I've tried holding him, like, do you need a hug? But usually that turns into a huge wrestle, and either I let him go and he still tries to hurt things, or I just pin him to the floor, which then he rages. And I've started just saying, oh, you can't be in the house if you're going to act like this. So I put him outside the house, which then we had some broken windows because he just threw things at the windows. And I mean, we've looked at a lot of things and we're still in the process, but in the moment, I feel like I would just love this pattern interrupt of, how do I show him that I still love him, but no, not acceptable behavior. And I have tried the loving kind. I've tried the I'm gonna beat you kind. I mean, I've tried it all, and I'm still just in that moment of, I don't know how to redirect this in an appropriate way.
Good. Great questions, you guys. I love this stuff. Thank you for asking.
Mhm.
So my number one question is, this kid's got a lot of emotion, right? I don't even have to meet him or know him. He's got stuff that needs to come out, and he wants to handle it with some kind of violence.
Mhm.
So my first question is, does he have a good outlet for rage? And if not, I would create one. So my very first thing with this, I would create an outlet, a boxing bag, an axe to chop wood, something he can beat the crap out of whenever he's upset. When Kaya she got very rage, just infuriating matter, biting her teeth, and just would get so upset. We bought this kicking pad, and I was like, just let's go. And she would kick it and and I'm like, just take it all out on me. And I'm holding the pad, and she would just go. And you guys, no joke, 60 seconds later, she's like, man, I feel so much better. Can we talk about it now, Dad? I'm like, oh yeah, right. Some children, and some adults for that matter, have to have some intense, maybe violent outlet that's a good thing, and then talk about it.
Mhm.
So when he's totally calm, everything's cool, you're going to lay out boundaries and rules. Like, this is our home, we pay for it. You're not touching any of this stuff. That is absolutely unacceptable. It'll never happen again. But I understand you get so upset, you get so angry, you just want to hit something. Guess what? Here it is. Or let him choose it. What do you want to hit? What do you want to do? When you just can't stand it, you just want to kill everything you can see, what would you like to do? And give them a positive outlet, something they can just break or hit or destroy or to get it out. And once that's out, then they can talk. Then they can process. You guys, the same is true for adults.
Because part of the frustration may be coming from when they feel those emotions and they want to have the outlet, and yet that outlet is being stopped because, yeah, it's not appropriate to put holes in the walls or break windows. So this is very helpful when they know, okay, these emotions are normal. Every person has experienced these emotions at some time. It's okay to outlet your emotions, but it needs to be in a way that's not damaging to people or things. And this is how and where you can do it. And here's the boundaries for doing that. So then they can go through that experience without it being interrupted, without feeling bad about it. That helps them to heal and to deal with those things.
Yeah. Good. My guess is perhaps many of you need outlets.
Punching bags are very useful.
Right? Maybe you just need to cry it out.
Mhm.
Maybe you need to scream it out. Maybe you need to talk it out. You just say all the ugly things, because once they're out, then you feel better. Maybe you write it out. I don't know. Like, I meet adults all the time. A lot of men turn to addictions, substances, violence, whatever. So there's healthy outlets. Miriam, that child, and I'm guessing all of us have a child who needs some outlets like this. So I think it's worth talking about. It starts at 2. It often never ends. I would highly recommend some kind of very physical sport for that child, Miriam. And try everything, man, from jujitsu to boxing to Krav Maga, like rugby, like whatever. And again, this is being proactive, right? We were talking about being super proactive. If you notice a kid that's just like rah, like that, they need those outlets. I was one of those kids. I had to have those outlets. And so luckily I had football, martial arts, wrestling. Like it was just, I didn't realize at the time, but it was absolute therapy for me when I was living on my own to just go beat a bag and lifting weights. I always felt so much better. So for a 2-year-old, something very physical to get it out. And again, it's proactive, right? So if they go to wrestling class, or they go to like their martial arts class, or they're doing their thing, they're going to gymnastics is even physical enough for little ones. If they're doing that regularly, what you're going to notice is the explosions just kind of go away, because these outlets are happening preemptively. You've got it scheduled Monday, Wednesday, Friday, they go and just have this physical exhaustion. So what was going to be an explosion on Thursday got taken care of Wednesday before it exploded, because they just went and they're like, man, I had an awesome day at the gym. In fact, the 11-year-old I was telling you about, he started going to the gym with his dad, and he put in the work today, like just left it all on the mat. He was spent. That's proactive, preventative therapy for that kid. Like they don't realize it's therapy, but like going and having a hard workout now, the rest of the week it usually goes better, because like I got rid of all that building frustration. Is this hitting home? Is this helpful stuff? Talk to me, people. Like all of this matters so much.
Yes, those are really, really great suggestions.
Okay, hope it's helping. Like all these are strategies. I know, and some of you are like, every time we make a suggestion, you see dollar signs.
You're gonna pay for it now, or you're gonna
You're
pay
gonna
for
pay
it
for
later.
it later.
Okay, so you
Like-
might as well pay for it.
Pay for it up front. It's cheaper, I promise. It just adds multiples later when the problems are worse.
That's right.
Just be proactive, be creative. Obstinate creativity. Please write that down. Think about that. In every parenting situation, obstinate creativity. What can I do about this? What can I do with this kid? What can I do here? How can I do that? How can we prevent this?
How can I direct what they're doing to a positive outlet? Because whatever it is your kids are doing, generally the problem is coming when you try to stop them from doing what they're doing. And as a parent, your job should not be to stop, but to direct. Think of it that way. I don't want to stop my kids from doing what they're doing. I want to direct it in a healthy direction. That will seriously solve a lot of your problems.
Changes everything. And
It changes everything.
it's true in work and at church and at school. If you have students or employees or whatever, instead of you stop doing that, you're doing it wrong, it's terrible. Like, hey, look at this. What if we approach it this way? I mean, it's so smooth, and you're just like, oh, okay. Yeah, what about that? Like, oh, hey, that's really fascinating. What if we take a look at this over here? It's just smooth. And
Take that
no
energy.
human being wants to be forced in any direction.
Or damned.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Stopping the flow of energy. You're taking that same flow of energy and pointing it in a positive direction.
So those of you with super energetic kids, it's not a curse, it's a blessing. You want children who are driven. Now, it makes for tough parenting sometimes, or at least it requires some creative parenting. But you want a kid that just lays around like a English bulldog and like does not. No, man.
So Stephanie has one
Yeah,
last
great.
question. She says, what do you do when your teen needs those outlets, but gets the adamant look in the eye and says he doesn't want to do anything you suggest? Well,
Perfect
maybe
example.
there are some things he wants you to do that you adamantly do not want to do anymore, right? This goes both ways. He is still living at your home. You are still providing things for him. And you can talk through this and say, you know, I've noticed this. I think this kind of outlet would be good for you. You get to choose ultimately, but here's some good options that are available nearby. And if you're not willing to do this, then, you know, I think I'm just not willing to pay for your internet anymore.
Or your food.
or your
That's
favorite
good.
porn.
But before that, and I think that's good. There's a point for that. I think even before that, I would just be like, hey, what do you want to do? What do you want to try? I saw this video. I had this conversation. What do you want to do? What do you want? Like, again, is literally asking, what would you like to try? Because that teen wants to have autonomy, wants to feel independent, wants to feel like this choice is mine. Teenagers love that. They're literally, their brains are changing for independence and they want to choose. And so even when you make a really good suggestion, they like it, they'll often say no. They'll give you the adamant look and like, I'm not doing that. And the only reason they're doing that because they want independence. They actually like the idea, but it came from you, so I don't like it anymore. So the point is, again, obstinate creativity, ask, don't tell. Hey, would you like, you think you'd ever like dancing or something, or try martial arts, or often I'll just go, I start. I'm like, you guys, I went to this class. It's incredible. You want to come with me? It's so cool. And I keep talking about it. They're like, yeah, well, I guess I'll try it all this time. And they go and they love it. And you make it a really great experience. They're like, yeah, let's keep doing that. And you lead the way.
Mhm.
But having these outlets, and sometimes the outlet isn't necessarily physical. Sometimes it's musical. Sometimes it's artistic. And they get to
right.
pound the piano or struggle with hitting these chords. And that's their outlet. It's enough for
Yeah.
them. It's their therapy.
Mhm. Yeah, so it doesn't have to be, we've been talking about physical outlets, but it doesn't have to be just that, because sometimes for other people, it is a more intellectual, emotional, mental, musical outlet that can also
Yes.
be therapeutic. And so definitely, I would say asking them, but also another thing that's a little even sneakier is just paying attention. If they notice things, if they mention things, if they talk about things, then look it up. Do they have classes for that nearby? And then be like, oh, hey, yeah, I heard they have this class, and just mention it. And let them kind of, take the lead on that.
And anything from horseback riding to ukulele lessons. Like some of your kids, I'm gonna throw this out there. Some of your kids desperately need some mental stimulation. If you have a little genius mind that's not being stimulated, it's going to show up in a lot of negative side effects. Some of you might have this kid that the mind is just so sharp and processing so fast, and it's just bored. It's underwhelmed.
And
And
boredom creates problems.
Creates problem. They need to be wrestling with something. Writing, science.
Speaking
whatever.
of wrestling, our
Okay,
daughter
we gotta
has to
go.
go to temple.
Okay, we gotta go. Love you guys. Hopefully this was extremely helpful. We covered a lot of topics and a lot of stuff. Again, parenting is not for wimps. And to do it well, it takes a lot of creativity, a lot of proactivity, and a lot of like moving and shifting and agility and pivoting and adjusting. Like, don't just sit there and be like, oh, there's nothing I can do about it. I don't know what to do. If you ever get to the point where like, I don't know what to do, sit down and get creative. What can I do about this? How would I do this differently? How can I approach it differently? If I keep saying it, it's not working, how can I ask it? How can I approach it differently? How can I redirect? How can I make investments? How can I create pattern interrupts? All of this stuff kind of fits in this. They're all puzzle pieces. And we start fitting them together. I mean, it takes practice and work and experimentation, but man, it makes everything so much better. And it is literally possible to get to a place where there's almost no fighting in your home. There's happiness and joy. Kids are chasing goals and you're cheering them instead of dragging and nagging. It's a beautiful thing, but it takes this obstinate creativity and proactivity, just being on your toes, ready to go, and loving on your kids and helping them, being real more strategic about it. Okay, love you guys. Thanks for being here. You're awesome. Keep it up. Reach upward.